Chapter 6. The return time has a way of softening memories, but never erasing them. It was the spring of 1980 when Michael finally returned to the little town by the lake. 5 years had passed since he last saw Sarah. 5 years of noise, distance, and trying to become the man his father wanted him to be. But no matter how much success he built, there was always something missing, a quiet emptiness that no city could fill. When his father passed away, Michael felt something inside him break loose. The weight he had carried, duty, guilt, silence, suddenly lifted, and all that remained was a longing to go home. Not to the house, not to the business, but to her. The train arrived at dusk. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and violet, just like the first evening he met Sarah. He stepped onto the platform, suitcase in hand, the air filled with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Everything looked smaller, quieter. The streets, the trees, even the diner. But the memories made it feel vast again. He walked slowly through the town, his footsteps echoing against the cobblestone. Some shops had changed names. Some faces were new. But the old diner was still there. The same flickering neon sign that read Sonny's Diner, though half the letters no longer glowed. Through the window, he could see a familiar silhouette. A woman wiping down the counter, humming softly to herself. His heart stopped. Sarah. Her hair was shorter now, touched by the faint shimmer of the years. But her eyes were the same soft green that once lit up his world. She moved with quiet grace, every motion filled with the same gentle rhythm he remembered. For a moment he just stood there, afraid to move, afraid to shatter the fragile magic of that instant. Then he pushed open the door. The bell above the door jingled. Sarah turned. Their eyes met. And for a heartbeat, time stopped. "Michael," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled. That same crooked, shy smile she had loved once. "Hi, Sarah." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with years of silence, of letters never answered, of words never sent. Finally, Sarah broke it. "I thought you'd forgotten." "I tried," he said softly. "But I couldn't." She looked away, blinking fast. "You stopped writing." He nodded, pain flickering in his eyes. "I never meant to. My father got sick. Things changed. The letters. I didn't know if you'd moved on. I thought maybe you deserved better." Sarah laughed quietly, shaking her head. "I didn't want better. I just wanted you." They sat together at the corner booth, the same one they used to share, though the leather was cracked now, and the table bore the marks of time. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping gently against the window as if the night itself remembered. Michael spoke first. "I've thought about this place every day. About you, about us. I kept every letter you sent, all of them. They kept me going." Sarah smiled faintly. "I still have yours too. Sometimes I read them when the world feels too heavy." He looked at her hands, still steady, still kind. "Do you still walk by the lake?" He asked. "Sometimes," she said. "It's quieter now. The water doesn't shine the same way without you." Michael reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly, and she didn't pull away. Her hand fit into his just as it always had, perfectly. For hours they talked. About lost years, about dreams that faded, about things left unsaid. There was sadness, yes, but also peace. The kind that comes when you realize that love, though interrupted, never truly ends. When the clock struck midnight, the diner lights dimmed. Sarah stood up, her voice soft. "Come, the lake's still there." They walked through the quiet streets side by side as if the years between them were just a long dream. When they reached the lake, the moon hung low over the water. The same moon that had watched them fall in love, that had witnessed their goodbyes, and now their return. The surface shimmered like glass. Michael exhaled slowly. "It hasn't changed," Sarah smiled. "Some things don't." They stood there in silence, the cool wind brushing against their faces. Finally, Michael spoke. "I came back because I realized something. Success, money, cities. None of it means anything without someone to share it with." Sarah looked at him, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. "I waited, Michael. Maybe not every day, but a part of me always did." He took her hand again, gently this time, like a promise reborn. "I don't want to lose you again. Not this time." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, tears shining like silver. The rain began to fall again, soft, steady, familiar, and just like years ago, they stood there, soaked and laughing, their hearts beating in the same rhythm as the rain. It wasn't the passionate rush of first love anymore. It was something deeper, quieter, steadier, the kind of love that survives distance, silence, and time. Some people wait a lifetime for love to find them. Others are lucky enough to find it twice, with the same person. As dawn painted the sky pink and gold, Sarah and Michael sat by the lake, hands entwined. The years had taken much, but not the thing that mattered most. Their love, older now, imperfect but unbroken, had found its way home. Chapter 7. The Second Chance. The morning after their reunion, the little town woke slowly under a soft golden light. Sarah stood by the window of her small apartment above the diner, holding a cup of coffee between her hands. The aroma mixed with the scent of rain that still lingered in the air. Below, the streets were wet and glistening. The world felt new, fragile but full of promise. There was a gentle knock on her door. When she opened it, Michael was standing there, smiling shyly, holding a bouquet of wildflowers he must have picked by the roadside. "Good morning," he said softly. Sarah laughed, surprised. "Wildflowers? You still remember?" "I never forgot," he said, handing them to her. "You used to say they were better than roses. Because they're free, like dreams." They sat at the small table by the window, drinking coffee together, watching the morning light fall across the old streets. For a long while they didn't speak. They didn't need to. There was comfort in the silence, the kind that only exists between two people who had once been everything to each other. Finally, Sarah broke the quiet. "So what will you do now that you're back?" Michael smiled faintly. "I don't know. Maybe start over. Find something simple, something real." He looked at her with a warmth that made her heart ache. "I've spent too long chasing what others wanted. I think it's time I learn what I want." Sarah looked down at her cup, her voice soft. "And what is it that you want, Michael?" He didn't hesitate. Sarah's eyes glistened, but she shook her head slightly. "Michael, we're not the same people anymore. You've built a life, and I stayed here. I've learned to be content with what I have." He reached for her hand. "Then maybe we can learn together. Not to go back, but to go forward." Her lips trembled with a smile. "I don't know if I can go through losing you again." "You won't," he said, his voice steady, filled with quiet conviction. "Not this time." They began to see each other often, not with the reckless passion of youth, but with the slow tenderness of people who had learned the cost of love. Michael helped around the diner, fixing the old jukebox, repairing the squeaky door and painting the faded sign outside. Sarah cooked, served customers, and smiled more than she had in years. At night they walked by the lake, the same path where they had once dreamed of a future. The years had changed them, but the feeling was the same, the comfort of walking beside someone who knew you, not just as you were, but as you had become. One evening, as they sat on a bench by the water, Michael said quietly, "I sold the dealership, my father's business. I thought it would make me happy, but it only made me feel empty. I don't want that kind of life anymore." Sarah looked at him with surprise. "You gave it all up?" He nodded. "Yes, I've saved enough to start something new. Maybe a small garage here in town. Fixing cars. Honest work." She smiled softly. "That sounds perfect," he chuckled. "Maybe not perfect, but it's mine." Over the next few months, Michael rented a small space near the edge of town. The locals were skeptical at first. A man who once belonged to a rich family, now covered in grease and sweat. But slowly, they began to respect him for his kindness and hard work. And Sarah was there every day, bringing him lunch, teasing him when his hands were stained with oil or when he forgot to take breaks. She called him the gentleman mechanic. He called her my wildflower girl. But life, as always, was not without shadows. Sarah's mother grew ill that winter. The diner became harder to manage. The bills piled up. Michael helped as much as he could, but Sarah insisted on paying her own way. "I don't want to depend on you," she said one evening, her eyes tired but proud. "You're not depending on me," he replied gently. "We're helping each other. That's what love is." She looked at him for a long moment, then finally nodded, her hand finding his. For the first time, she let herself lean on him completely. In the quiet nights after closing the diner, they would sit together, listening to the radio. Fleetwood Mac still playing softly through the static. Michael would hum along, and Sarah would rest her head on his shoulder, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek. "I used to dream of leaving this town," she whispered once. "Now I just dream of growing old here, with you." He smiled and kissed the top of her head. "Then that's the dream I want too." A year later they were married, not in a big church or grand hall, but in the diner itself, surrounded by the people who had watched their story unfold for years. The neon sign outside flickered brightly for once, and the jukebox played Landslide. Sarah wore a simple white dress. Michael wore his old suit, slightly worn at the sleeves. As they exchanged vows, there were no tears, no fireworks, just quiet joy. Two souls who had wandered far, finally finding home again. That night, as they danced under the diner's fading lights, Sarah whispered, "Do you think we'll make it this time?" Michael smiled, pulling her close. "I know we will, because this time we're not chasing dreams. We're living them." Love, when given a second chance, is not about reliving the past, but about writing a gentler, truer story in the same hearts. Outside, the rain began to fall again, as if the heavens themselves were blessing their second chance. And in the little town by the lake, two hearts that had once broken learned at last how to heal together. The ritualcy together through the years' time did not rush for Sarah and Michael. It moved gently, like the slow turning of pages in an old book. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and before they knew it, years had passed, quietly, steadily, beautifully. They built a life together in their small town. Michael's garage stood across the street from the diner, and every morning, before opening, Sarah would wave to him through the window. He would lift his hand, covered in oil and grease, and smile, the kind of smile that made her heart feel young again. It wasn't a grand life, but it was theirs. They faced the ordinary struggles, bills, long hours, sickness, and the slow wear of time. But there was laughter too. Sarah often teased Michael about his cooking. He could fix a car engine blindfolded, but he once burned toast so badly that the smoke alarm went off. She laughed until her stomach hurt, and he loved her laughter more than any music in the world. Every Sunday they drove to the lake in his old Ford Mustang, the same car from their youth. The paint had faded, the seats were worn, but the engine still purred like a memory refusing to die. They'd sit by the shore, sometimes talking, sometimes just holding hands in silence. It was their ritual, their reminder of where everything began. As years went by, Sarah's hair turned silver, and Michael's once strong hands began to tremble slightly. But neither cared much about age. To them, time had only deepened what they shared. They had learned that love was not only in the big gestures or the first kiss. It was in the quiet acts repeated every day. The way Michael always brewed her coffee before sunrise. The way Sarah always left a sandwich wrapped neatly in his lunchbox. The way they said goodnight every night without fail, as if the words themselves were a promise against the darkness. Sometimes on summer evenings, Sarah would close the diner early. She'd walk to Michael's garage and find him working late, the sound of soft country music playing from the radio. She'd lean against the doorway and say, "Come home, Mr. Mechanic. The world can wait until morning." He'd grin, wipe his hands, and say, "Yes, ma'am," before locking up and walking home with her under the stars. Their home was small, a single-story house with white curtains and a tiny garden that Sarah loved tending. She grew daisies, sunflowers, and lavender, filling their world with color and scent. Michael often said, "When you smile in that garden, even the flowers look jealous." But not every day was easy. There were moments of fear and fatigue. The winter of 1992 was harsh. The snow piled high and business slowed. Michael fell ill with pneumonia and spent weeks in bed. Sarah stayed by his side, keeping the house warm, feeding him soup, whispering to him every night, "You'll get better. You always do." He did recover, by slower than before, but strong enough to return to his garage. Yet something changed in him after that. A quiet awareness that time was no longer infinite. He started taking more breaks, watching more sunsets, holding Sarah's hand a little longer. And every morning before heading to work, he kissed her forehead and said, "Another day, my love. Let's make it count." Their love was not perfect. There were small arguments about forgotten errands, about money, about old habits, but even their fights were soft, fading quickly into laughter or gentle apologies. They had learned that being right was never more important than being kind. Sometimes Michael would look at Sarah across the dinner table and smile suddenly. She would ask, "What are you smiling at?" And he'd reply, "Just remembering how lucky I am." She would roll her eyes, but her heart would flutter all the same. In the evenings, when the diner was quiet and the stars were bright, Sarah would play the old jukebox in the corner. Fleetwood Mac, the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, the same songs that once played in their youth. She'd sway gently as the music filled the air, her eyes closed, lost in memory. Sometimes Michael would take her hand and dance with her, slow, clumsy, but full of love. Neighbors often smiled when they passed by the diner window. They'd see two old lovers dancing under soft light, as if time itself had stopped to watch. Years passed. The town changed. New faces, new shops, new music. But Michael and Sarah remained a constant. They became something of a legend in town. The couple who had loved each other since the 1970s, who had lost and found each other again. Teenagers would whisper about them in the diner. "Do you think love like that still exists?" And Sarah would smile when she overheard, thinking, "Yes, it does. But it takes patience, forgiveness, and a little bit of magic." One autumn evening, Sarah sat by the window, watching the leaves fall. Michael was outside, closing the garage for the day. The sky was gold, and the air carried that bittersweet chill that comes before winter. She watched him walk toward the house, his steps slower now, but his smile still the same. When he entered, she said softly, "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" He nodded, "Every day. And I still can't believe you said yes, twice." Sarah laughed, shaking her head. "I'd say it again if I had to." He leaned down and kissed her hand. "Then I'd still ask. Love doesn't fade with time. It changes shape, becomes quieter, wiser, and somehow even stronger." And as the years continued to unfold, Sarah and Michael found peace not in what they had gained, but in all they had shared. A lifetime of moments, both ordinary and extraordinary, woven together by one simple truth. They had loved truly and completely.